Hello, it's me, and I've had a couple of requests that I'm going to try to kill a couple birds with one stone. And they had to do with...
I'm interested.
Yes, we've got some interesting puzzles here, don't we? Off in the background. Anyway, they all had to do with 4-layer puzzles, 4x4s, whether they're mods or supercubes or just a request to do this guy here, the Megamorphinx. I'm going to see if I can do as much as I possibly can. So I wanted to talk about what can happen if you say make or buy a 4-layer puzzle, 4-layer mod. I did have a question from someone who stated that he made a 4-layer mod and he got stuck with a certain area of parity. I'm not sure exactly which part of it was, but we're going to kind of go over different aspects of it. So the first thing to understand when doing a mod, say a modification like this, or like this, or like this perhaps, is to understand what issues you might be dealing with and to see how we would approach it. Well, if you're going to do modification, you have to understand what a supercube is. This is the most purest form of a supercube. So a supercube just means it's a 4x4, a 4-layer puzzle. Now, as a 4-layer puzzle, it has all the parities that you probably know about. Say this, once you reduce this, this may be flipped over together in a way that cannot be solved if we're just a 3-layer. And there's various ways of getting out of that. But when you do a supercube, it just means that the orientation of everything has a place. For instance, when you take a look at these centers, you can interchange these centers and it really doesn't matter. But you can't do that with this. So all that really means is that you have to make sure that as you're putting in edges and centers that they're all aligned the right way. So this is the purest example of the simplest kind of supercube. Basically, what that means is that it's just the orientation. It maintains its cube form, so you don't have to worry about shape shifting. And also, every piece here has a specific place to go. In other words, there's no equivalent piece to this that can be substituted for here that can go here. Because this has very specific places to go, the process of solving this is actually very simple. The main difference between these two is when you come across a situation like this. Okay, something like this. Now notice what happened here is these two are off. These two have been swapped. And these two have been swapped as well. Now notice everything else is pretty much lined up in exactly the same way, but these two are swapped. If you come across a situation like this, you can really solve this fairly simply, fairly easily. These two are not quite where they need to be. So what I can do is I can do a variety of different strategies. What I can do is I could do an opposite edge swap between these guys here by doing a parity algorithm between these two. And this will effectively seemingly just swap these. And that's holding it like this and going to U, to R, to F, then to U, to U, to F, to R, to U. And that fixes that just fine, and you're done. In this case, we can't do that because there's something that happened when I did this that's not readily apparent if it's not a supercube. Because watch what happens when I try to put these in the same way. To U, to R, to F, to U, to U, to F, to R, to U. So it did put these back, but take a look at what it did with this. It actually took the center and rotated it by 180 degrees. It did more than that too. It actually rotated this center by 180 degrees as well. Now, it actually did that with this puzzle too. When I did this algorithm, when I swapped it, this rotated 180 degrees and so did this. But you didn't know, and you wouldn't care. And the reason for that is because these are pretty much equivalent to each other. The problem with a supercube is we run into problems with that last layer because of orientation issues. So, so the question is, how can we do that? How can we swap these two? So the algorithm to get out of this one would be starting with the middle slice here, UI. So this is a UI, R, Fi. Then the top one here, U, R, I, F. Then we do a U, oops, U, and then a D, just with a middle one here. Then finish it up with a Fi, R, UI, then F, R, I, and swing it back with a middle DI. And that's back over here. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to demonstrate that with this one over here. This one is going to be an example of how to not just use the algorithms that we were talking about, but also how to use deductive reasoning regarding where things are supposed to go. And I'm also going to demonstrate something regarding the last two centers, and we're going to have to bear in mind the law of cubes. This is going to then lead into the final demonstration slash tutorial, a much deeper tutorial on this guy. I actually did one before in my Land of the Supergiants series, but at that time this was more of a novelty item. Not too many people had it, but as more people are expanding out into 4-layer modifications, more people are getting the Megamorphinx, there's more of a demand to know how the heck to get through it. And that's what we're going to talk about. So this puzzle is made by Rafael Gulluni. It's an excellent, I mean, you can see that the turning is excellent for a 4-layer puzzle. Very, very smooth. Now what's interesting about this is that the color scheme here matches the color scheme here. But the pieces are not equivalent. This piece here, this black and yellow, cannot fit where this black and yellow is. I could turn this over here and end up with this solved state where both of these are the same color and these are the same color. But although they look like they have equivalent colors, they're not equivalent pieces. So as I'm mixing this up, and again, this is a modification that does not shapeshift. It's the next step up above these guys because there's a little bit of a complication in terms of how to get the centers. So I'm just going to keep scrambling it, take it from there, abracadabra. Okay, so nice and scrambled. I really like this puzzle because I like puzzles that when you put it in a scrambled state, you can really tell it looks all jumbled up. So it's pretty impressive looking when it's scrambled and neat when you can work your way through it. So, how are we going to get through this? Well, like any 4x4 solve, the first thing that you want to do is you want to reduce everything. Now bear in mind, I don't have any keystone to tell me where the centers are supposed to be. So with a Supercube mod, not only do I have to define where the centers are, I also have to define which center goes where, because I don't have anything to guide me with that. But in this case, I also have to define the rotation of this. When I put a center in, I might accidentally put it in 90 degrees off from where it's supposed to be. So we're going to kind of talk about exactly what that means. Now, how am I going to put this in? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start matching up colors. So here's orange and black. I'll find another black. Now here's another black over here, but I'm not going to put the other black next to this over here. Why? Because there's two oranges. And I'm not going to have a center that has two colors. I could, potentially. But the way that I'm going to organize this solution is I'm going to find a black with another color and set it up over here. So as simple as that, I'm now going to find another orange, or a yellow rather, to put over here. Yellow of a different color. Well, here's yellow and green, but I need to get it in conjunction with this over here. So yellow and green. And I will find one right here. So I'm going to move this up and assemble this like so. So now that's in. Green, so all I have left is green and orange. So let's put a green and orange in here. Green and orange. I have to say this has quickly become my favorite 4x4 modification of this type. And the reason is because the movement is effortless. With some of them, there's locking up that happens, and that's to be expected when you're using certain mods. Okay, just move this down over here. This is going to now occupy a space here, orange and green. So I can move this down, cross, back, and up. So I have my first discernible center. Now, how do I know what goes down here? I have to define what that is, and I also have to define the orientation. Well, with this one, I could tell because I just looked for the other blue. Same thing with this. The reason why this is a step up is I can't do that. So what I need to guide me is potentially these guys here. So if I have, well, I can use this one. So this is a corner with an orange in it. I see that the brown is over here, so it's going to have to be a brown center over there. So let's go ahead and find a brown center. It's right here. So I can turn this here and across here and say, okay, here's the brown center. Now this is where the deductive reasoning happens. Which one is it? Is it this one with the green to the left? Or is it, say, this one where there's a blue to the left? Now this one does not have blue, light blue to the left in this case, but I can put one in like that, such as this. I could potentially, we'll just, for the sake of argument, move this up here, turn, and turn. Okay. So this looks like it should be okay. I've got two browns, two different colors here. I've got the baby blue facing this way, I've got the light green facing this way. But I know that there's other pieces that are equivalent to these that are opposites, that go on the opposite side. So how do I know that in this particular case, this is going to be the one that's over here and it's not going to be the light green? Well, the ultimate calibrator of a puzzle are the corners. In this case, I use the edges, but the edges aren't going to help me completely because it could throw me off. I just have two colors to deal with. So I need to know what pattern it's supposed to be. So I'm going to use the corners to see what's going to make more sense. So whatever the corner is going to have to be brown, orange, and black. Well, here's a brown, orange, and black over here. So I'm going to just move this in to see if it likes where it is. And I'm just going to keep moving this in until, bring this up here, okay. And I can tell this is the wrong one because these two are flipped in relation to this. So I'm going to look for another orange and black. Here's another black here. And it looks like it's probably going to be this guy here. So I'm just going to move this one down and move this one up in conjunction with that. Okay, so I can see an orange and a black here. I see brown here, and what this tells me is I was wrong. It's supposed to be green over here, because remember, this is all going to be one colored side, so to speak, false side. When I say false side, I mean it has the same color, but it doesn't function as a side. This whole thing does. So this tells me that this is supposed to be black, and this actually belongs here, because you can see red, white. This is supposed to be green. So I need to find another brown and green, basically. So let's see if I can find it. It's this guy over here. So I'm going to move this one in because I know that this is one that's supposed to be here, brown and green. So now, light green rather. So now I'm going to find the other brown that's the other color, which is going to be blue, just like this, but it's not this one because this is not going to occupy this space. That's why I say this is not equivalent to this one, because this one cannot occupy the space in the same way. This one, no doubt, can. So yeah, this is going to come to here basically. So turn, turn, turn. Okay, so now I know that this is correct because of what the corner showed me. Now I kind of lost the corner here, but I can easily bring it back over here. So what we see here is we see orange, black, brown, and green. So now I know this is calibrated correctly. I'm going to continue with this side. I like this light blue here because I have a purple instead of a brown. So I know what comes here is supposed to be green and purple. That's what's fun about this is the deductive reasoning that you have to use with this. So here's a purple and green, but it's not going to occupy this slot. I need the other purple and green. Again, I don't have equivalencies with this. Now that's going to be important. I'm using the word equivalencies. I'm pointing out that every centerpiece has a specific location. An equivalent piece would mean another piece that looks just like this that I could put in here, just the same as I could put this one in. So another piece that looks like this and can be swapped for this. This puzzle does not have that. And because of that, this particular 4x4 mod is going to have a certain parity that is not going to happen, that you'd find with other ones. So we're going to go here, and now this is going to come into here. So I'm going to move this in to occupy this 1x2 space, take it to the side, bring it down, and then just reconstitute things, like so. Okay, so at the end of the day, I now have this one. I now have this one in. So I'm going to continue this process of equilibration, if I need to, with these sides. So I bring this back in green, with these corners rather, green, brown, orange, black. So now I know that this is supposed to be white and red. I've got this one, and this lines up with that just fine. I can now leave the realm of these corners. I don't need it anymore because this is where it's supposed to be here. So I'm going to now use this to guide me, and I need a red one here that does not have white on the other side, which is here. Here's a red and gray. Does this occupy this space here? And the answer is yes. This can only occupy the space here. Move it in to create the 1x3 bar. Take it away from the plane that I moved it in to another plane. Bring it down from that plane. And I'll move it back. Bring that plane back. Turn and turn. So I basically put this back in. All right, so now I have to find another white. Here's another white. This is white and blue, but it does not occupy this space. So this is not the right one. This must be the right one. So I'm going to move this here, move this here. This will come down to here. So turn, occupying this space here, move it out of the way, turn it down. And now I bring it all back. So far so good. Now I'm looking for a gray and blue. Right over here. Maybe. Is it the right gray and blue? And nope. This one. Must be this one. Gotta be this one. So now it falls together pretty easily for this particular type. And if your particular type of 4x4 mod is like this, you know, ask the question, are there any centers that can be confused for each other? If the answer is yes, then you're going to have to move on to the next one, which is this guy that has a similar property as that. But if you find that your particular mod doesn't have that attribute, we can keep going. Now we can just make sure we can correlate it with the other side, because I have a red and green, and you can see I've got red and green here. So all is right with the world. Black and white, black and white. So we're good. So now we're going to go to the next center here. Now this, since the centers across from each other are complementary to each other, so are these. But if I didn't know that, then I can say what is right across from dark blue, and that's going to be baby blue. So I'm going to do the remaining baby blues left. So here's one over here. So let's put it in, move it in here, turn it back, and I'm going to correlate it with this one here. So this will come into here, turn, turn, and turn. Purple, only one remaining purple left. It's going to be this one. Move it into here, creating this side here. That 1x2 bar, moving it out of the way, moving this out, up, across, back, and up. Alright, I just have this one left. This putting in, turning, moving it out of the way, that's a technique. It's a corner technique that we're going to be using frequently. Light blue and brown. What do we got here? Light blue and brown. Well, actually, brown and light green. What am I talking about? And that's going to be over here, and there's only one of those left, so it must be this. So again, putting this in, this is going to come into here. Move this in from this plane to make this 1x2 bar, out of the way, to this plane, and move it down from that plane. We then move this back the other way, put this plane back in because we bumped it out. Now I move this back in to put in the 1x2 bar that we just created, and there it is. Okay. Now usually at this point I kind of take a pause and see if it correlates with everything, and it's a little hard to tell with this one because again we have to make sure that these correlate with each other, and it's not readily obvious, but light green and yellow, let's see if that correlates. You see yellow and purple, so this is actually supposed to be over here. Blue and blue, I know that those correlate, so I think we're doing well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 centers. We're down to the last 2 centers of this puzzle. Now, when getting the last 2 centers, I'm going to give an example of these. So this is a regular puzzle, and this is a supercube. It gets a little more complicated on a supercube with the last 2 centers. With this, all these, well, these 4 are equivalent to each other. So that kind of complete equivalency without any need for orientation makes it pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it in by that same method that I did with all these other puzzles here. So this needs to occupy this spot. So I'm going to turn this over here so that this, well, let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over here, and I want this to occupy the proper spot over here, and I'm just going to do it on the right side. So I'm sorry if this seems confusing, but it's to prove a point. Anyway, so this is going to have to come up over here. So for this to come here, I'm going to go R over here, then I'm going to go UI. Now I'm going to bring this up exactly the same way, then LI, and I'll just bring it down. So turn this to a U, and then an RI, and reconstitute this other one back, UI, and L. Actually, I think maybe this was in here. This was how this was, yeah. So the end result is it appeared that I just put this and I put this over here, but that's not exactly what happened. It looks like these two swapped, but actually what happened is this went to here, and then this color went here, and this color went here. But you didn't see that because this was green. I just put a green to here, and this green went over here. So these two swapped. It was actually a 3 cycle, but you can't tell because these are equivalent to each other. So 2, let's say I wanted to put this one in. I'm just going to move this here, and move this over here, and I'm going to do the same thing. This will occupy the slot. It'll look like these two will have swapped, but that's not exactly what happened. What's going to happen is this will come here, but you won't know it, and this will slide over here. So it's not this one that's going to be here, it's actually this one that's going to be here. But for the purposes of a non-supercube, you can't tell the difference. So I'm going to go like R, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like these two swapped, but it actually didn't. It can't do that because, as you recall, you can't do an even number swaps. So this didn't come here, this came here, and it's perfectly fine. This slid to here, and this went over to here. So I can try to get these corners back, put this over here, I think, and I think this came over here, and this did something like this, and this did something like that, and that did something like that. So my point being is that algorithm that I did, I only did it twice. And I only did it twice because a lot of the equivalencies bore in. Now, what if I try that over here? Would it be that simple? Well, this is going to uncover the true nature of what we're talking about, because now, let's say I wanted to put this green up to here. Well, first off, it can't be any green. Here, I just picked any random green, but I can't. This is the one that belongs over here is the one that has the white stripe, which is this. So this one has to be the one to come over here. So let's say I do that same algorithm again. R, that's the middle, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. So these two did not swap cleanly with that. If you notice, this green did come up over here, but the yellow that was here didn't come over to here. The yellow that was here actually went over to here, and this yellow scooched over to here. So just to demonstrate that again, I'm going to move this over here, move this over here, and this yellow, bear in mind, this is the yellow with the blue and purple stripe. That's not going to be the one over here. The one that's going to be over here is this one. So what appears to be a single swap is actually going to be a 3-cycle. This will be here. This will be here, so the one with the blue and purple is actually going to end up here, and this is going to end up here. So if I were to do the same thing, and that's what you see. You didn't notice that over here, but that's actually what happened to put them in. So basically it demonstrates what has to happen with that. This would be done exactly the same way. Now in a situation like this, when I'm doing the last two centers, I have to bear that in mind in terms of how things are going to be swapped. So what actually belongs over here? Well, this is red and gold. Red and silver rather, that's going to have to end up over here. The silver is next to the green, so the green one has to be here. So these greens all have to come down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring everything down. Just turn this here, turn. Nothing complicated here. And I'm going to match this green down to here. Bring it down, and then just bat this out of the way and bring this back up. Okay, so now I have these over here. Now all I have left is to put the orange and black one, which is here, and I'm just going to solve this bottom center here. So move it down, turn. This is a center placement of a 4x4 puzzle. No different. I do assume knowledge of how to do a 4x4. Okay, so this is correct. I've got my yellow and brown just like this. I've got my green and gray just like this. I've got my yellow and purple just like this. So now we have the last center over here, but here's the issue. These reds are fine, but these are not. These have to be swapped. So this has to be, this is a situation where you actually have to do a swap. So the question is, what does this mean and how do I do this? How come when I did the last two centers over here, I just focused on one, this one just fixed itself? I didn't demonstrate it with this one, but because it was already kind of preformed. But as I was setting this up, how come this didn't just get fixed? How did this get swapped like that? But here's the other rub here. This seems like a parity because I can't just swap this back. For me to try to swap this would be an odd number swaps, and you can't do that. You can't just do an odd number swap. So what exactly happened with this? More likely than not, as you solve this guy or this guy, that's the situation that you're going to have. You're going to have a situation where all the centers are in, except one is going to be fine on one 1x2 bar, but these are going to be flipped and they have to be swapped. So how did that happen and why did that happen? So here's why that happened. Here's why that occurred. The problem with this is not so much that this is a parity and this is flipped wrong. The only way that I'm going to be able to flip this is if maybe something else gets flipped. But then I'm just going to be chasing my tail. I flip these two, that's one. Something else must be flipped at the same time, which would be this. But I have another way out of this. I have another way of potentially fixing this, because swaps and rotations are counted with each other. I can't do an odd number swap. I can't just swap this. I have to swap this and something else. And I cannot rotate a center by 90 degrees, not one center. I can rotate one center by 90 degrees and another center by 90 degrees, two centers. But what I can also do is I can do an odd number of swaps and one 90-degree rotation. So the way to get out of this, if we, so what we could do is we could do a swap over here and hide it into a rotation, a 90-degree rotation over here. It's kind of like balancing an equation with balancing a mathematical equation. A way to get away with something as long as I do something on the other side of the equation. There must be a conservation of swaps as long as I have the law of the cube that's being held to. So the key here now is swap this, but at the same time do a 90-degree rotation. That's legal and kosher and fine if I do it like that. So there's actually another nuance to this as to what happened with the centers. What happened is that the corners here, as being the ultimate calibrators, one of these centers got placed in 90 degrees off from everything else. And by everything else, I mean everything else is coordinated and calibrated with the corners just fine. We talked about the notion of calibration of a puzzle and what can calibrate the puzzles during the last viewer request series. So basically the corners are the ultimate calibrators. Everything was put in right, but one of them was put in 90 degrees off. I had no way of knowing that I was doing that at the time, but that's what I did, and the way that I know that is because this last center has these two with an apparent parity situation. So what that means is this is an indicator that I need to rotate one of these by 90 degrees. And the reason why I know that with this is every one of these has a specific place where it needs to go. There is absolutely no false equivalencies because none of these pieces have equivalent pieces that I can put in here. So this is an indication to me. It is a sign. It tells me one of these got 90 degrees off. The only way to swap this back is to rotate any of these by 90 degrees. So here's how I do that. Pick any center to act as a buffer to this. I'm just going to pick this one. And I'm going to put it up like this to where the two that have to be flip-flopped are one below, one above. So it's a proportion like this. With every move that's going to happen, as I'm swapping these two, I'm going to be scooching these guys here. And I'm going to be doing that algorithm of center swapping basically 3 times. And with each time, I'm going to cause a swap and a scooch. And all these are going to eventually rotate 90 degrees clockwise, and each one is going to scooch. So the first set of the algorithm is going to put this to here. This will come down here because I have to get this to here. So first I'm going to put this to here, and this purple and blue is going to scooch over to here. So that's going to be my first scooch, so to speak. So we'll do our R, U, I, L, I, U, R, I, U, I, L. And then we'll do our U to get this back. So here's what happened. Basically this, the one that was blue and white, was put down to here. The purple and blue, the one that was here, scooched over to here. So I did my first scooch and I brought this one down. This one came up here to be applied later. Now this I want to put in to this space. So what I'm going to do to set that up is turn this over here. So this is in my ready position, and this wants to swap with this. So I'm going to turn this over to here. So with this next one now, this will come up here and be fully placed appropriately. This will come down here so that it can do its swapping, and then this one will scooch over here. So I'm going to do another scooch. So let's do it again. R, U, I, L, I, U, R, I, U, I, L, U. Okay, so this is fully placed, swapped with this. This came down here. This scooched over here to put this one in the right. Now one more, we'll do my final scooch and my final swap. This now needs to occupy this place where this one was. So I'm going to put this over here, move this over here. This will be fully swapped here. This will then come down to here. Now this originally was in this position. The overall effect by putting this here is this will have scooched up to here. This guy will scooch over to here. So my last placement and my last scooching will have rotated this 90 degrees and will have fully swapped these two. So why talk about it? Let's just do it. Turn and turn. The overall effect with this now is these two have been swapped and this has been effectively rotated by 90 degrees. Now because of that, I know this puzzle is now completely calibrated. This orange and brown is where it needs to be. Let's see, we got a red and green. I've got blue and white. Well, actually blue is supposed to be with dark blue, so over here. White and black, red and green, so all is fine. So now this is fine. So in this particular puzzle, when you don't have any equivalencies, when you get a flip like that, that tells you one of these had to rotate 90 degrees, do this algorithm, you will swap those two, but more importantly, you will rotate that 90 degrees to where it's supposed to be. So you can see this is right side up, red to red, silver to silver, right side up, blue to blue, right side up, but this is wrong. So basically it's like you took a single segment and turned it upside down. That went against the law of the puzzle. So again, law number 1, you can't do an odd number swaps. Law number 2, you can't do a 90-degree rotation of a single piece. And number 3, you cannot flip one piece upside down without flipping something else upside down. So this went against that third law. We've seen examples of the first law where it seemed like there was a single swap, examples of a second law where we rotated something 90 degrees off. This is the third law. To get this out, what's law number 4?
No cubes on the weekend.
No cubes. I'm breaking law number 4. So anyway, what this is supposed to be is to turn this upside down. It's the famous Red Bull algorithm, which will flip this. It'll also flip these two. You may ask, well, how can you just flip? But it doesn't just flip this upside down, it actually flips these two as well. There is no Red Bull algorithm with a 3x3. The fact that I have 2 here, the reason why this works and does not break the law of cubes is because I'm not just flipping these two, I'm actually swapping them. And that's going to be 2R, 2B, 2U, L, 2 up, RI, 2 up, R, 2 up, 2F, R, 2F, Li, 2B, 2R, and that cleanly and clearly puts that up. So we've seen in practice all 3 laws of the cubes. Again, can't swap an odd number, can't turn one center 90 degrees, can't flip one piece over without flipping another one. Where this is in and this is in, but these two are flipped. If in your 4x4 mod or 4x4 puzzle you see this, we have to flip these by that same algorithm we did with this guy or this guy. There's no difference with that. And that's holding it to where you have the two that need to be flipped on the left and the right, and start off with the middle, UI, then R, FI, then the top U, RI, F. Then you do a middle U, and then a middle D. Finish it off with a FI, R, UI, then F, RI, and middle D. And look at that, like magic, you put it back. Now it's corners. Now, in this particular case, I know there's not going to be an issue with corners. Why? Because they don't have equivalency of centers. In the next video, we're going to see what happens with that equivalency of centers. And then it becomes solved. But the whole point with this is when you see it flip like that, it is possible, unlike this guy, to have a center rotated off by 90 degrees. If these are off by 90 degrees, it doesn't matter because they're all equivalent. If these are off by 90 degrees, it's going to show up as not being able to get them in or having something flipped. Here, if these two are flipped, who cares? You wouldn't notice any difference. So this is flipped and this is off by 90 degrees. So what? Here you can tell that if this is flipped, if you have an even swap over here and this is by 90 degrees, you will see the difference, and that's how you get through it, and that's how you do supercubes. Next up, we're going to see what happens when we add centers with equivalencies, and hopefully address 2 other questions, 2 requests. Number 1, solving the megamorphinx, and number 2,
do the dishes.
Do the dishes. That comes much later. And number 2, how to deal with what appeared to be a parity of the corners, which is no parity of the corners at all. Thanks for watching.